All right, my friends, welcome back to All Cars, where we talk about all cars all the time, except for today, where I'm going to answer your questions that you asked me. So about a week ago, I posted a video and had a couple things on my mind I want to point out, and I asked if you had any questions for me, really just about anything. And I got quite a few, some of them clumped together, and I'm going to go through them and answer them one by one today, so stay tuned. All right, my friends. Well, I appreciate you being here, and so we're going to jump right into it. This is just purely me answering your questions, and I appreciate y'all not making it too personal. There's a couple in here, but the first thing I'm going to say is question number one, which you didn't answer, is my name. I've told you many times, I'm John, but I don't have an H in my name. It is Jon, so I always find it a little funny. Everybody automatically defaults to the John in the comments when they say my name, but I thought I'd just let y'all know it's John. The question number two that doesn't come up, this is a surprise for you. So I've got this stuff back here. This is hard to do, guys, on the bookshelf. So I think you probably noticed the Pikachu right there, and let's see, the snake plant, and I've got a couple other things back there, but there's a few things on here. I don't do it often, but I do change those around a little bit, and I realize that's kind of like an Easter egg for you in the background, so keep an eye on it. Be careful, because I do sometimes film these out of order. I'll get inspired to do something, but I'll schedule it for, a few weeks later or something like that. So it will change a little bit, you probably see, but just keep your eyes out. I'm not going to point out. There's one I put over there, right there. You can't really see it, because unfortunately it's too small, but it's a little Imperial Star Cruiser from Star Wars, because I'm just a huge nerd. So moving on, we're going to start with question number one. And I appreciate everybody who did submit questions. And Mr. Hawk says, if you created a car company, OEM, what would you name it, and what type of cars would you make? So interesting question. And I've kind of got three answers for you here. The first one is kind of a joke. I think I would call it Edison, and then I would just steal all of Tesla's stuff. Okay, nerd joke, sorry. If I'm more serious, I would have to assume that I have like $1 billion to fund the design and a factory and get everything set up. So assuming I just had an almost unlimited supply of money, I would try to get the Saturn name from General Motors if they would part with it. I really like the Saturn name, and I like the reputation it did have. And what type of cars would you make? I would honestly start off with kind of the bread and butter. Try to build one really good platform, kind of like Volkswagen has done, that could be used for a small hatchback for Europe and a smaller or mid-sized car, and then a couple of sport utilities. The one thing I would really like to do is, I'm not totally sold on the whole EV thing. I know we're going there probably in the next 10, 15, 20 years, but I really like the concept behind the hybrid system that General Motors had in a hybrid system where you could use a really tiny engine, extremely fuel efficient, running basically a big flywheel, use the battery packs and, I don't know, electronic stuff, but using actually motors at each wheel. So you could imagine your smaller, least expensive cars, you could just really have one motor, a performance version have two, and then you could easily make four-wheel drive systems out of this. And I've always been fascinated with the idea of instead of articulating the suspension of the wheels like this, why not do it long ways to the body? So then you could really get a lot of ground clearance out of it and articulate each wheel individually. So it's all a pipe dream, guys, but that's kind of what I think I would do. Question number two, have you seen the 2022 Ford Maverick smaller than the Ranger pickup? There's a number of them about the Maverick here. I'm going to answer them all in a second. Reaction to the Ford Maverick. What other interests or hobbies do you have other than cars? I may be starting my own channel, restoring Matchbox and Hot Wheel cars, and generally babbling. Anyway, John, I've really enjoyed watching you and your channel grow. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here. I did not know that people restored Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars, and that's pretty cool. And I strongly encourage you, go start a channel. There's tons of videos out there about the right way to get it set up and the SEO and getting it set up. And I don't know if you're going to get hundreds of thousands or millions of subscribers with that topic, but you know what? For every interest out there, there is somebody else looking for information about it or looking for a community. Go do it, man. Just, pick up your phone, set it up, and start doing it. And, try to get your videos 10, 13 minutes long. Use a basic editor. We'll talk about that in a minute. And start uploading them, man. You'll be surprised. You will get some people who will be mean on the internet because they can, but you will eventually find an audience. Just keep at it. And there's going to be people out there who wanna watch this and commute with you. So do it, man. Jump in, both feet. Oh, other interests and hobbies. I'm a little bit of a gamer. Mostly, I don't know, World of Warships, things like that. Mostly free-to-play games now. I used to be a really big Battlefield guy. Other than that, I work. Those are really the two things I do. So really, cars and reading about cars has been my hobby, and that's why I turned it into this channel. It makes me sound really, really boring. I guess I read. I enjoy reading. Stuff like that. 1982 to 96 GM A-body cars, the Celebrity, the Cutlass Sierra, the Buick Century, and the Pontiac 6000. So, kind of a question. I don't know if you're suggesting I do a video on them. I don't really want to. Long-lived and overall boring cars, honestly. I mean, the Cutlass Sierra and the Century especially were really reliable cars, in my opinion, but not terribly exciting. The engines were good, but overall, they just weren't as... They were quieter, but they weren't as advanced as what the Japanese were starting to do at the time. And these are a couple of the... a few of the cars that I really think of when I say that to get the same performance as the Japanese, they had to use V6 engines, which means they didn't get as good a gas mileage. But these were super boring cars, but they were really, really reliable. Don't know about the Pontiac 6000. The only ones I've ever seen have always been pieces of junk. So, don't know. Load of questions, keep it to 2. Have you ever passed up buying a car that in hindsight you wish you had bought? And funniest, wildest, or weirdest personal car story? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cars I wish I had bought in the past. I think the biggest one would be when I bought my Mazda Protege. I drove it back to back with a VW Golf. And I've said many times in videos, I love the Golf. I think of it as nearly the perfect car. But I was surprised how close the Protege felt to it, and also the Golf was quite a bit more expensive. And I went with the Mazda. Now, the Mazda is one of those cars I absolutely loved it. It sold me on Mazda. I never should have gotten rid of it because I love that car that much. But it's also the one that I chose. I wish I'd bought the Golf. I've always wanted to get a Golf, and I guess that's probably the big one right there. And then the funniest personal car story, this one, I've got a few, not very many interesting ones. I mean, I could tell you about the time I drove a 76 Buick Regal over 100 miles an hour and the front end came up, and that terrified me. But my best would be, in my early 20s, I was into CB, right, Citizen Band Radio, and I had my 83, I believe it was, Buick Regal, and I'd installed a CB in it. And I had a very minor fender bender, let's say a month before this actually happened. And I bumped into the back of a van, and unfortunately their bumper went into my grill and knocked one of my headlights out, but also bent it where it was pointing down. I'd gone and picked up the headlight and realized that the actual metal was bent and I couldn't put the new headlight in. So I had driven out to visit my then girlfriend at the time, and I think it was 45 minutes away, something like that. I was heading back to college, and it was night, it was dark as heck, and it was pouring rain, and I'm cruising down the road, and I saw a cop go by, turn around, and turn on his blue lights. I pull over, and he comes up, and he's like, do you know why I pulled you over? I'm like, I don't know. I'm doing the speed limit. And he's like, you've only got one headlight. And I was like, okay, if you look at my car, it was in a wreck, And if you look behind me in the back seat, there's the light. I just bought it, but I haven't replaced it because it's been raining. I am a student here. My car stays parked. I promise you I'm going to change it. I just haven't gotten to it, and it's been pouring rain. And he looks back in the back to see I've got the headlight, and he looks up front. He's like, was that a CB radio? And I was like, yes, it is. And he's like, let me ask you a question. I put one of those in my wife's car, and she just has no range. I mean, literally just, a few dozen feet or 100 feet away, it gets, weak. Do you have any ideas for me? And, of course, he's still got the flashlight, right? And I was like, well, I bet your wife drives an import, doesn't she? And he's like, well, yeah, why are you asking that question? I was like, well, because the imports at the time anyway, they use a 6-volt system on the cigarette lighter. American cars used a 12-volt system. Said, I'm willing to bet your wife has an import car and you wired it in through the cigarette lighter fuse. He's like, oh, well, yeah, that's exactly right. And I said, I think that's probably why you don't have enough power going to your unit. Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm going to let you off with a warning tonight. So there you go. My biggest story about cars is being pulled over by the police and being enough of a redneck that they let me go because I answered a CB question. I'll add one more here if you find it interesting. The same girlfriend, we had gone to look at a Jetta because Volkswagen was running specials. It was like $179 or something like that, $159 to lease a Jetta. And the Jetta we were looking at, this was a time when they had CD changers in the trunk. And we're looking at it, and he's like, he opened the trunk, and you put your CDs back here. And I was like, well, if you're on a long trip and you want to change the CDs, so you have to pull over and open the trunk to change your CDs. He's like, no, you can lay the back seat down and just tell her to crawl back here and change it for you. Yeah, we didn't buy a Jetta, let's put it that way. Next question from Eric's Variety Channel. As both car nerd and a computer nerd, what kind of computer do you use? And many of your enunciations and phrasings make me think you may be in the same region of the country as me. If it's not too personal, what state do you live in? I actually geotag a lot of my videos. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I grew up just south of here, about 20 minutes, something like that. I was not born in this area, but this is the area I grew up in. I'm mighty proud of living in the South. Computer. It's black, and I think it's an Asus. Might be an Acer. Fact is, I bought it about 8 months ago now. I will actually look and see if I can find the specs, and I'll put it here in the video when I edit it. I did go with an AMD processor for the first time, but I don't remember any of the designations on any of this stuff right now. I did go with an AMD for the first time instead of an Intel, and mostly what I do is I go for value, so I'm not looking for cutting edge. I'm looking for really solid, but where the prices come down a little bit, and that's what I bought. I had kept the same case for like 10 years, so I got a new case, new power supply. I just bought a whole new computer with 2 new monitors and everything else. So if I can, I'll pull the stats and I'll put that in the video here. Just so you know, I use Movavi MOVAVI Video Suite. That's how I actually edit the videos. So if you're an Intel person or if you're a Windows person, I really recommend them. They're one of the better ones out there, really popular. I'm happy with them, and they're easy to learn how to use. You know what, if you're a Apple guy, as far as I can tell, iMovie is excellent, and you can make really professional looking videos just using that. So keep that in mind. Do you miss Pontiac? Which model, which segment would you imagine Pontiac in now? Sports, crossovers, SUV? No, I don't miss Pontiac. The fact of the matter is I've never liked Pontiac. There was a few models I individually liked, like around the 86 Grand Am was kind of cool back when they actually had a really well-defined kidney-shaped grille. But the problem with Pontiac is really twofold. The first is that they were just another division. So here's a General Motors, like, here's a platform. Pontiac, go do something with it. But then they also didn't have their own engineering to go really make it special. They had design treatments, and maybe they got a little bit better suspension, or maybe for a little while they got an individual engine in one of their cars. But overall, Pontiac was just another boring division, and they wanted to say Pontiac was the sporty division, but every division of General Motors could say that it was sporty at some point in time. I mean, certainly Chevy has the Corvette and the Camaro and everything else. Oldsmobile was the Rocket division and their 442. Buick during the 80s, of course, they had the supercharged V6 Regal. And so Pontiac, although they were the performance division, they still weren't performance, right? They were just another division of General Motors. And what really killed them for me is their interiors. I really think Pontiac had among the ugliest interiors of the 80s and the 90s, and specifically those stupid gray knobs that look like nipples. You know, it just cheap. So they had a few individual cars that were really good, but even they were not as good as many of the imports or what you could get from somebody else. So I don't miss Pontiac at all. I would say the Grand Am, the Solstice was kind of fun, but even that, it was another GM attempt where it wasn't as focused, you know, as distilled down to its essence as say a Mazda Miata, but it was beautiful. If Pontiac still existed now, let's say they managed to keep it, I could really see Pontiac kind of, if they did it right, if they really did it right, I could see Pontiac as the cheaper cut rate competitor to something like Alfa Romeo, right? Or maybe even Jaguar. Not luxury per se, but that more focused, we're going to do something sporty, whereas Cadillac's taking on the Mercedes and the BMWs, Buick's kind of going for that Acura premium level. I could really see Pontiac coming out with in the crossovers and SUVs and moving to EV, really being in that Jaguar sport utility, Alfa Romeo sport utility, but just less expensive. I could see him doing something more like that with it, but I just don't think it was ever meant to be. What car do you regret selling the most, and what car would you import if you could? What do you think about Italian cars, and which one would you want to own? And you love all the videos. I appreciate that very much. The car I regret selling the most would probably be that Mazda Protege I talked about a little while ago. It really was a good car. My second convertible Jeep, my first Jeep Wrangler, I had no reason to get rid of it. I should have kept it. My Volkswagen Fox, honestly, it was getting a little long in the tooth, but there was nothing wrong with it when I got rid of it. I should have kept it as well. So I've been open about, in some of my earlier videos, of when I look back, I changed cars like every 2.5 years. Wasted so much money doing it. Got rid of so many cars I never should have gotten rid of. And, well, I regret it. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of them I wish, but I couldn't have 5 cars in my driveway, so I had to get rid of them at some point. Some of them I wish I'd held on a little bit longer. What car would you import if you could, and what do you think about Italian cars? I'm going to answer those two together because they're kind of the same. Italian cars, I don't trust them. I think they can build really beautiful stuff that is so interesting compared to most of what we have here in America. But that interesting means it's coming with compromises. But even the cheap ones that don't have a lot of power they can still just be a hoot, right? Because they're eager little puppies in some ways. But ultimately, I don't trust them, and I don't trust their reliability. If you want something that's going to last for a long time, buy Japanese. But if you want something with some passion and some personality, you buy Italian. What car would you import if you could? So don't laugh at me, all right? And there's going to be a time when, and it may be already, I haven't looked, when the import restrictions are going to end because this car is going to be 25 years old. I'll be able to bring it in. A Fiat Panda, like the first generation. I mean, made no horsepower, this dumpy little hatchback thing, but you could get it with all-wheel drive. And if you watch anything, they did it on the Grand Tour, and then also I've seen some other videos where they pitted against like a Land Rover or Range Rover or something like that. It's so lightweight, it just kind of bounces over everything. I absolutely love them. and think it would just be a hoot to have one of those and own about 10 acres and just bomb around in it all the time. So for a new one, what would I import? I don't have an answer for you. If you're looking for an exotic Ferrari or Lamborghini, it wouldn't be one of those. I don't really know. I don't know what I would import if you wanted me to pick a new Italian car, but for an old one, it would be a Panda. You have any opinions on some of the other car video channels, such as blah, 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 blah? So yeah, I watch a lot of these. I don't know all of them. Like Ed's Auto Reviews, I had not heard of that. I recently discovered Tavarish. I love Hobbies Garage. Love Doug DeMuro. How somebody can have that much personality and it comes across on the screen. He's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. Big Car is one of my favorite ones, honestly. And if you're watching this and you haven't seen Big Car, go look it up. This guy does the history of individual car models, and they are some of the best you're ever going to watch. And of course, I watch a lot like the Fast Lane Truck, Alex on Autos. Is it Car Mom? I think the lady who does the mostly sport utility reviews from the perspective of a mom with a stroller and everything else. She's really, really good. So I try to watch a lot of these. If you've got any suggestions, something I'm missing, let me know. Scotty Kilmer, I left him to last. I like Scotty Kilmer in small doses. He's funny, and I guess I'm doing it too, aren't I? You know, big hand movements, and he's just a big personality. But I can only watch like one or two at a time before I get, let's say, burned out on his videos. And personally, I find his videos to be contradictory a little bit. If you go back a little bit, you'll find one, say you'll find a video that's, why Dodge is the worst truck brand ever. And then 2 months later, he'll do a video. It's like, why Dodge is, the best truck brand right now. Something like that. So, I try to watch all of these, and I find all of them entertaining. It's a subject I love, so I try to watch as many as I can. Did you modify a car before? No, never have. That's not really my scene. I like Fast and the Furious movies, and I love seeing what people can do to cars, but no. Other than changing out stereos, or my very first car, I put in air shocks at the back so I could actually pump up the rear of it a little bit. Other than that, no, I've never really done anything at all. And that's all the questions other than the Ford Maverick. And if you're still asking that, then you haven't seen the 2 videos I've done. Basically, I absolutely love it. I'm blown away. They put a hybrid in it, and the price is only going to be about $20,000. I went and played around with the build and price, and I got my price up to about $24,000 for something that gets 40 miles to the gallon in the city. I think this is an absolute winner. Even my wife likes it. And while deep down I don't like to buy new cars, it's going to be tough in a few months when this actually hits the market to go look at one and not come home with it. So that's my thoughts on it. But that's all the questions for today. The one thing I'm going to throw in as the last one is, nobody asked, what is a car you bought that you shouldn't have? And my answer there is, unfortunately, Saturn. The Saturn Relay, which was their minivan. It was based on the GM's brand, the Oldsmobile Silhouette and the Chevy, whatever it was called. And when my first wife and I bought this, we bought it used, and we had a chance to drive a Ford Windstar, a Honda Odyssey, the Dodge Caravan, and then this thing back to back. And the Honda was just so much more expensive, but by far the best. I thought we were going to get the Windstar, but ultimately, when we finally drove the Saturn, we loved it. We liked the dash layout, we liked the materials, we liked everything about it, but it did not hold up at all. It's probably one of the worst cars. It might be the worst car I've ever owned in terms of how it held up. She kept the car, and it just literally fell apart. Literally, pieces fell off. The molding came off from around the windshield, and she was out of town. I mean, she was hours away from home, and one day it just stopped and it was done. So that's the car I never should have bought, but I did because I had some loyalty to Saturn, and it was the last GM car I've ever owned. So guys, I appreciate this really long video. Hopefully I'll edit this down a little bit. It won't be quite that long, but really appreciate the questions. I don't know that I'll ever do this again, but I appreciate you being here. And hey, you know what? If you've made it to the end, you know what to do. like the video, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Be sure to check out all my other videos where we talk about cars all the time. Have a good night, guys.